Well, today on Spotlight Now, we key in on two city departments that are helping to help save lives and have really been in the headlines over the last few months. We'll start off our conversation with the Board of Water Supply.
That's right. Ernie Lau is joining us live in the studio. Following that, Dr. Jim Ireland, who heads up Ocean Safety and EMS, will take our questions. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. Joining us now live here in the studio is Ernie Lau with the Board of Water Supply. Ernie, great to see you. Thanks so much for coming in.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan and Yunji. I'm glad to be back. Almost the end of the year, and Christmas is right around the corner.
You know, there is a lot that we want to catch up on. And, of course, the Board of Water Supply playing such a key role in what was happening, obviously, at Red Hill. We want to talk about some of the other developments that have been making news lately with this agency that you manage. Let's start off with Red Hill and where things are at right now. We know that the status, the Navy has made progress in unpacking and defueling the facility. What other concerns do you have at this point in time right now about the process and where things are at with Red Hill?
I'm very pleased with the efforts of Vice Admiral Wade and the Joint Task Force Red Hill in getting this far. They've unpacked or removed about over 104 million gallons at this point. Now it's a transition from moving from defueling to actually closure. So the last bits of fuel, the last drops of fuel won't be out during Admiral Wade's efforts, but it'll be the next Joint Task Force under Admiral Stephen Barnett that'll be responsible for that.
Tell us a little bit about what this process has been like for you. We know that, we've been speaking to you in various platforms for the last few years. You had a lot of mistrust toward the Navy and a lot of trepidation about how quickly they'd complete this task and how well it would be done. Has that relationship changed and evolved as this process has gone forward?
There's one of the things I suggested at the moment they talk about defueling was, can you move a schedule faster? Because I think originally they were looking at completing that work by middle of next year, and they've actually about 6 months ahead of schedule. So I really appreciate what they did, and they were true to their word in terms of doing it safely and expeditiously. So I think they only had a few minor spills, which they contained.
And how often are you meeting or speaking with members of the military and the officials that are still involved in this process? Is this something that a conversation that continues to happen frequently? Because that was another concern of yours in the past, is in our prior conversations, was just the overall communication and transparency of the military. Has that line of communication changed?
In terms of actually engaging with the military, and in particular the admirals in charge, there are 3 admirals in charge, Admiral Jeff Killian, Stephen Barnett, and Admiral Wade, John Wade. We have regular every other month meetings face-to-face, either at my office or at Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. And the Vice Admiral Wade invited me to participate in the Defueling Information Sharing Forum, and we have regular meetings, I think, every other month.
And, one of the issues that had come up in the past was the lack of sharing of data, that they were having some monitoring wells, but weren't actually sharing the results of those wells. Has that changed?
I think you're talking about, Yunji, about we wanted to get access to, like, Red Hill Shaft to take water samples so that we could run the chemical analysis and determine what we're finding in the water. That hasn't worked out, and that's still an outstanding issue. But I'm glad you brought up the issue of transparency, because I think this is actually a great opportunity for the U.S. Navy and our Department of Defense to really step up on building trust with the community by being completely transparent. So keep in mind the Red Hill facility, the Secretary of Defense made the decision to defuel and close, and they're practically done with the defueling. There's still work to be done there, and won't be done until the last drop is out. But also this facility will be empty, and it will be on the way to permanent closure. So at this point, in my mind, there's no reason to redact or keep any of the information about the whole 80-year history of this facility. Keep it quiet or not share it with the community and with the Board of Water Supply and other stakeholders. Because we now move on to the task of addressing the past leaks of this facility. And the latest estimates that there could be up to upwards of 2 million gallons of past leaks from this facility over the 80-year history. Really, we want to understand what we're dealing with on the cleanup, the remediation, the restoration of the aquifer.
One of the things that we've also talked about in the past was just the constant monitoring, because we know that it does take some time, as you've explained, that when a leak does happen, you're not going to see it right away, that it's going to require constant monitoring. How frequently is that happening, that you folks are going in and testing the existing aquifers to make sure that there isn't any other contamination?
So I want to clarify there. Board of Water Supply has not been allowed to actually go in and sample from those Navy monitor wells or their drinking water source that's shut down. That's something we would like to do. I believe the military is being required to test on maybe a monthly basis at these locations.
Okay, so I want to go back to what you just said, 2 million gallons over the length of the life of this facility. How do we begin to clean something like that up, given that it could have happened 20, 30, 40 years ago? Is there something that can be done to help to mitigate those effects?
I think the first step is finding out, where is this fuel at? Where is it located in the environment? Is it located between the bottoms of the tank and the top of the groundwater aquifer, what we call the water table? That unsaturated volcanic rock, is it stuck there like a sponge and slowly releasing over time? And so finding those locations and then being able to characterize how the aquifer, the geology is set up, to be able to see if there's any opportunities to actually extract or remediate some of that fuel that's trapped there. Some of it's already in the groundwater. We see that in continued detections of total petroleum hydrocarbons and other contaminants in the groundwater. So fuel hits the groundwater, it starts to dissolve into it and moves with the groundwater and travels someplace.
Over time that we've been having this conversation, and it happened, towards the end of the year, a few years back, when all of this was exposed, and this really became such a nightmare for so many that have suffered through this. And you've been on the front lines of this for some time, looking at where things are at right now as you look at this process. And looking back and reflecting back to what the last 2 years have been like for you. What are your just overall feelings with where things are at right now, and how far you guys have come?
When I first learned about the whole underground fuel storage tanks of the Navy at Red Hill, that was back in 2014. At that time, the emphasis was trying to keep that facility. The military and the regulators were focused on keeping that facility operational for maybe another 30 or 40 years. So I never dreamed that we would actually reach this point where 104 million gallons have been removed, the majority of the fuel out of that facility. So it's like like I've woken up from a dream, and suddenly a big threat that was hanging over our water resources in that area has been removed. So it's a very positive thing, almost surreal. But I want to attribute the success of this effort of achieving that not to the Board of Water Supply or Ernie Lau or just a few of us that have been working on it for a long time. It's really the efforts and of the community, our Native Hawaiian, Kanaka Maoli community, community stakeholders, all different types, people that are young, our children, our keiki, our adults, our seniors, our kupuna, all coming together with one voice and made this happen. So mahalos to them.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the work that still needs to be done. One of the big things outstanding is a pretty significant monetary claim that your agency has filed against the Navy, $1.21 billion asking for. Where is that process? What would that money go toward? And what have you heard in response?
So what we did, back on October 28th, we filled out a claim form. It's called an SF, I think, 95. Filled out that form and submitted it to the Judge Advocate General in Norfolk, Virginia. And this is utilizing the provisions allowable under the Federal Tort Claims Act. We had to file that form within 2 years, which is the statute of limitations. If we didn't file it within 2 years, we'd lose this opportunity forever. So I've always been clear to everybody that we are going to pursue cost recovery from the U.S. Navy, from the Department of Defense. This situation at Red Hill was preventable. They knew they had problems for many years. So they really should pay for the cost of dealing with this. And if we get that money, you know, if I had a Christmas wish right now to Santa, I would say, Santa, can you put a check for $1.21 billion in my at the Board of Water Supply? Come up and you can come to our lobby and give us that check. That would be a tremendous Christmas present. But I know the reality is they may not turn over that money to us willingly. So this process now goes. They have about 6 months to respond to us, of which there are only 5 months remaining. And depending on the response, if they deny the claim, we have the option to file a lawsuit against the U.S. Navy.
Any indication of what sort of feedback you've gotten because of this claim? Have you heard anything from the congressional delegation about their maybe internal conversations? Any indication to give you either way that this is something that they would like to settle?
No indications right now. I did alert them that we were going to file this claim and actually go public with it in November. I think they understand that we are exercising our legal rights, and I would hope to get their support in pursuing this. And this claim, if I could point out, it's for the just straight out replacement of Halava shaft, building a new Halava shaft at some other location that is beyond the reach of any fuel contamination in the aquifer emanating from Red Hill. Also new Halava wells and IAEA wells stations.
So we've talked a lot about the Halava shaft in covering this story. Is that shaft essentially closed for good then?
At this point, Yunji, I don't know. Until we understand what's happened to the underground aquifer, because I go back to the analogy that I used, I think, 2 years ago. It's like picture the aquifer in that whole Halava Valley from Kapukaki all the way up toward the IAEA Halava side as a cup of water with two straws. On one straw, on one side of the cup, was the Navy's Red Hill shaft pump sucking out of the aquifer on that side of the valley. On the other side is our Halava shaft, but it's one cup. It's one connected aquifer, and we know from past field tests coordinated by the USGS with the Navy, the Board of Water Supply, and the state that a change in pumping on one side of the valley is felt on the other side of the valley and vice versa. So we know it's connected. So the issue of turning on Halava shaft, what I don't know is how that would impact movement of the contamination in the aquifer from Red Hill and move it further westward, because I don't want to create a problem that future generations might have to deal with. If we start to pull the fuel across the valley and have it get closer to other BWS wells, and we have many wells to the west of Halava shaft, then the impact could be even greater than those 3 wells that are shut down right now. The other thing, too, is what I'm trying to avoid here. We see a real-time experiment happening right in front of our eyes with the Joint Base Pearl Harbor-Hickams water system. 2 years ago, or shortly after Thanksgiving, their water system suffered fuel contamination directly, where it was in their system, in the homes and residences of the base families and dependents. And 2 years later, they're still detecting petroleum hydrocarbons in their water system. I do not want to repeat that with the bigger Honolulu water system, which may be 4 times larger than the Navy's Red Hills Joint Base system.
Again, we're joined by Ernie Lau from the Board of Water Supply, and always encourage those of you who are interested in engaging in the conversation. You can always scan that QR code that you find at the bottom of your screen and submit your questions for Ernie Lau here this morning as we continue on in our conversation with all that's happening at the Board of Water Supply. Something else that happened was you announced some pretty significant rate hikes that you've had to impose and that was approved. Can you talk us through why that was needed overall and the direct result of it as a result of what's happened with Red Hill?
Okay, thank you, Ryan. So for the Board of Water Supply, I just want to point out, we've been around since 1929. We're financially self-sufficient. We do not get any revenue from property taxes being collected by the city. We have to operate on people paying their water bill. And when I talk about paying your water bill, a lot of our customers have a water component and a sewer charge on the same bill. These rate increases that the board adopted only apply to the Board of Water Supply water charges and not to the entire bill. So typically for a customer like myself, my water only portion of the bill is about $30-something. The sewer portion is another 80 plus dollars. My bill becomes over $100, $120. The rate increases are only for the water portion of the bill, and they're spread out over 5.5 years. What we looked at in our mission is to provide safe, dependable, and affordable water to our customers. So safe and dependable water service is kind of this dynamic balancing act with affordability. But one thing I want to make it very clear, I will not compromise the safety and dependability of our drinking water service to our customers, because that is what people need to survive. So we looked at the needs created by rising costs, and a lot of the rising costs are attributed to the issues of the pandemic, and still I think we all feel the economic impact of the pandemic. We haven't really come out of it. Also other changes around the world, including energy costs. So we feel that the rates are necessary to be able to provide safe and dependable water service to our customers going forward for the next 5.5 years.
If you're able to get that 1.21 billion or somewhere close to it, will these rate increases somehow be offset, or are these happening no matter what?
So Yunji, I don't have a penny yet from the federal government, from the U.S. Navy, but if we get substantial amounts of money coming in, and we actually have that commitment in front of us, then we'll take a look at the water rates and see what it should be going forward, adjusting for the new flow of money into our accounts.
And forgive me if for my ignorance in the overall accounting and how things are budgeted, but when you factor in all that has happened with Red Hill and the amount of time, effort, and resources that you folks have had to pour in from the department, that must not have been something that was initially budgeted within your department. So how is that? Is this almost like a reimbursement of some of the funds that you guys have had to front during this time of having to combat with Red Hill?
Some of it will be reimbursement. I think I forgot to answer the last part of your last question to you, is are the rate increases driven by Red Hill, the issues of Red Hill? And the answer is no, they're not. When we look at our CIP, which the impacts are mostly on our CIP and less on our operating budget, only about in our 6-year CIP that we project to be funded through these rates is about $1.26 billion. Of that $1.26 billion, the Red Hill related costs are about 6%, or about $76 million or $77 million. So about a small percentage can be attributed to Red Hill. But the rest of it is just the challenges we face to operate an island-wide water system serving over 1 million people every day with safe drinking water. We have to produce 145 million gallons a day. And all that infrastructure, all it takes to operate this water system, we this year are going to need about $276 million in revenue every year. And that'll increase over time because of increasing costs.
Wow. Let's talk a little bit about replacing the resource that has been lost, at least for now, with the lava shaft. I know that you've been out exploring other areas. How fruitful has that search been, and how far away are you, do you think, from finding a new source that can replace that one?
I think we're many years away from that. We looked at 8 potential locations because we selected sites that we already owned land that's within an existing facility. And that means it's also close to the water system. So pumping it out of the underground aquifer can go right into the pipes or tanks and to supply our community. Out of the 8 sites, only 2 turned out to be feasible or viable. And we're proceeding to drill the exploratory wells for those 2 locations, one in Aiea and the other in the Newtown area. So I think it points toward the challenges of developing replacement wells. It will be a long process, and we will have to look at many different sites.
And with that, knowing that that also is going to come at a cost of just constantly having to find this new source, is that something that is also included within some of the money that you're asking from the federal government?
Yeah, like the 1.21 billion includes 3 sources. You know, the biggest being Halava Shaft, equivalent to Halava Shaft, and 2 well stations equivalent to Aiel and Halava wells. We are also looking at other wells in the meantime because we had projected that the Honolulu area, the water demand would grow over time. And also the Ewa area, that whole Ewa Plain, Kapolei is growing, a growing community. And some parts of central Oahu that we're going to need to develop more source capacity. So in the meantime, we're also pursuing new wells to help supply water for those communities.
Let's go back to the fuel itself. And we know we talked a little bit about cleanup and remediation, but do we know where that fuel is right now?
I think that's the $1.21 billion question. Nobody really knows because there isn't enough, for example, monitor wells or test wells drilled all the way down until you hit the aquifer below, and to be able to understand the geology and also what you're finding in terms of fuel contaminants in the groundwater. There's not enough. Really only a part of Halava Valley has been characterized, the side closest to the Red Hill facility. The military, the Navy is starting to drill at other locations, and we applaud that, but there's much more effort needed to expand our knowledge and understanding.
And if and when you find that, given how deep it sounds like in the system it is there a way to actually recapture any of that and try to save the aquifer overall? I mean, what the concern, of course, is that keeps going deeper and deeper and contaminates more of our water supply.
Yeah, that's a question we don't know the answer to, Yunji. But it's really important that we don't ease up on that effort, that we continue to push hard with the support of our regulators, the EPA and the Department of Health, on holding the military accountable to continue the investigation, because we are actually doing work that will be to the benefit of future generations. Because when you have fuel in the environment like that, because of Red Hill, and the latest estimate is now close to 2 million gallons, it's not going to disappear overnight. It's going to persist out there, and the question is, what's happening? Where is it moving? What can be done to try to clean it up?
This really has become your world over the last 2 years, unfortunately, having to deal with this crisis. But when you look at what the Board of Water Supply has to do on a daily basis beyond what happened at Red Hill, whether you're talking about water main breaks and you're trying to repair infrastructure, you're talking about other sources of water and monitoring drought conditions. When all of this happened, how much more work did it place upon your department, and how many other areas of the normal operation that the agency is responsible for maybe suffered or was set back because of all the attention that has had to go towards Red Hill?
So I want to correct you on that.
Please.
Even in spite of the additional work and issues that we have to deal with Red Hill, we continue to address all the other areas. So those main breaks, and we are working hard. It'll take many years to actually bring that number down. It'll take many miles of pipeline to be replaced out of the 2,100 miles of pipeline. We continue to work hard in all those areas. So we don't want to just say because of Red Hill, we're easing off on drought planning, water conservation, on main breaks or maintenance. We want to keep that going and do Red Hill at the same time. And on top of that, have to deal with these forever chemicals that are coming our way that the EPA in the near future will start to regulate.
Let's talk a little bit about drought. Lahaina, of course, brought into sharp focus what can happen when drought is not managed. What's your message to the public about drought? It's hard to keep that in mind when it's been raining so much, but how are you seeing drought impact your work, and what are your concerns?
My concerns are, the uncertainties of where climate change, our planet's climate is changing. And what will that bring us in the future? We can't even guess. It could bring more rain, or it could bring rain that is short duration, intense storms that creates flooding issues. And most of it runs into the ocean. It doesn't stick around to recharge our aquifers. So climate change creates a lot of uncertainty. Hawaii has experienced drought in the past, and sometimes it's the drought that goes on for multiple years. So even though we're getting a little rain right now, and I really appreciate every drop of that precious ua falling on our watershed areas, helping to recharge the aquifer, but what we don't know is prior to that, we do know that prior to that, we had about 5 months of way below normal rainfall. The summer was really dry. Will this rain continue through this winter? Will next summer be even drier? And will we be in this cycle because of El Nino for multiple years and actually enter into a multi-year drought condition? That's where we're going to need everybody's kokua to conserve water, to only use what you absolutely need to use, because this is a precious finite resource that originates as ua, or rain falling on our watersheds.
You know, it's funny because anytime it rains, I think of Ernie Lau now, because I know you must be so happy every time there is.
I am. I get wet when I walk my dog, but that's okay.
Yeah. You know, I also just want on a personal level, just hear from you. And, you know, we're talking again about your experience over the last few years of dealing with Red Hill. How much of this has just impacted you overall? And I know you had mentioned in the past that you weren't getting a lot of sleep. Are you able to sleep a little better at night? But overall, just what you've gone through over the last few years and having to lead during this time, what were some of the challenges and maybe the things that inspired you the most?
I think some of the challenges are, you know, it's just like on top of all the other challenges, you kind of layer now Red Hill, and how to deal with something that happened that was so horrendous in 2021 to many people on the base. It's been tough. I feel like I've kind of aged even more. If you look at the videos online of me talking about Red Hill, and Erwin Kawata, my associate, we've both been on this for 10 years now. My hair was black, and I had more hair then. But now it's really getting white, so I'd say it's been kind of stressful. But I still wake up sometimes in the early morning hours, and I can almost hear our precious Vi crying because it's been contaminated, that pollutants are endangering its purity. So we really need to think about our water resources as gifts from Keakua.
We're going forward now with this last phase of the defueling. This is a complicated phase for the Navy, something that they haven't had to do before. The gravitational defueling is done. What are your concerns for this next phase in particular? Because we are still talking about tens of thousands of gallons of contaminants.
That's a very good point. So, you know, Vice Admiral Wade and his team, the Joint Task Force Red Hill, have been very focused and have put resources and attention to it. I would just hope that Admiral Wade, with his Joint Task Force, will keep the same level of achievement and commitment and focus on this next important stage, all the way through closure, but also through the remediation effort, the investigation and cleanup of the environment. We need this effort to continue at a very high level.
And as we wrap up here, just any final thoughts that you might have as we say goodbye to you? Or, you know, last time we're speaking to you this year. Any New Year's resolutions, anything you're hoping for this holiday season, and any final thoughts that you have as we leave this morning?
I just want to mahalo the community for saving water. Treat every drop as a precious gift. Mahalo for those that have stood up over the years, some of them even 10 years with us on like the Hawaii Sierra Club. Just mahalo to them for keeping this attention. We need to treat our Aina with aloha.
Okay, Ernie Lau from the Board of Water Supply, thank you so much for being here today. Stay with us. Jim Ireland is here from Emergency Medical Services along with Ocean Safety. He'll be joining us right after this break.
Well, welcome back to Spotlight Now. Thanks for tuning in here on this Tuesday. We want to remind those of you who are watching at home that you can always engage in the conversation by entering your comments into the Facebook page of Hawaii News Now's platform, or you can scan the QR code right at the bottom of your screen and enter your questions. And now, Yunji, we transition to our next guest.
That's right. Dr. Jim Ireland is joining us live in the studio. Of course, the head of Ocean Safety and EMS. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. And I'll say it's nice to be in the studio, not doing these by Zoom as we
Exactly.
did during COVID.
Very nice to see you in person. I want to start with some great news for EMS, a new recruit class coming through, and a lot of new hands on deck.
Yep, this is our 4th recruit class in the last 2 years. It's our largest recruit class, 26 graduates. They're on the ambulances as we speak, getting their kind of final evaluations, and they'll be cut loose to work independently probably in about 2 weeks or so, but we're very proud of them, and it'll definitely help because EMS is busier than ever, and it's really, really busy.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the strain that has your department has had to go through, and adding these new recruits, what a difference that will make. What are some of the things that will immediately be able to help by getting this additional support on board?
Well, first of all, EMS is a stressful occupation. It's a profession that demands every day your best. And no matter what you see or do, you have to be still compassionate, give great care. And I feel like I'm on a championship team. I don't know if feel like I'm the player or the captain or the coach, but it's a championship team. We have just such great paramedics and EMTs. But it's stressful. In the last 2 days, we've had a 6-year-old fall out of a window. We've had a head-on collision yesterday in Eva Beach with critical injuries, cardiac arrest, beach emergencies, and so it's just that the need is so great. And nationally, EMS is struggling. Nationally, they're finding people are leaving the profession because of just how stressful it is. So the people that we have and are committed to this, they love the job, but it's busy, and at some point it gets too busy, even if you love the job. And so what these extra people will do is allow us to ideally prevent closures when we have people that are ill, and it will allow us to open up additional ambulances. And we have a plan for a few. Probably in February that we're going to open additional ambulances that were funded in last year's budget. And so we're excited about that because we can still provide the same great service, but each individual ambulance, our 21 ambulances, will respond to less calls if we can put more on the streets.
One of the things that was really supposed to help alleviate this pressure on your agency was the CORE program to try to answer some of the folks who were calling on a regular basis, who were in need of services, but maybe not having an emergency at the time. How has that come to bear? Have you seen an impact that CORE has had on the number of calls that you're having to respond to?
It's helping, but I'm going to challenge the CORE team in 2024 to even do more. We have great successes. We have numbers to show for it. But what I tell people, number one, I tell people if homelessness was easy, it would have been fixed already all across the country. So we know it's not easy. The second thing is no matter how good we do and how good our statistics are, if you can drive down King Street and see encampments and tents, there's a lot more work to do. And we know it's not just King Street. We know there's difficulties in Kalihi, Windward Side, Waianae. And each community, I think, has its own solution. But we're working very hard. I think we're collaborating more with the governor and his office and staff more than ever. And so I really think in 2024, we're going to see some major strides in our effort to combat homelessness.
But overall, do you think that this is a step in the right direction? How much of an impact has this program made, or what would be some of the key things that need to improve within the program for us to begin seeing some of those changes and more of a substantial improvement in this overall problem?
Well, one of the things we did is the city and the governor, we each opened up our own medical respites. Now, I think the governor's has temporarily closed and is moving. Ours is still open, but we use the core staff to open that. And then what I learned is now that took too many of our core staff off the streets to staff that respite. And so probably within the next week or two, we're going to transition the staffing of that respite to a nonprofit, pay them, and then use our core staff then rather than in-house in the shelter, getting them back out on the streets.
Okay, and the governor's program that you're referencing is the Kauhale across the street from Queens Medical Center. That they're going to be relocating in various areas, but not having it right across the street, are you worried that that's going to have any kind of an impact? Because it is so nice for the folks who are discharged to be able to walk across the street and continue services.
Absolutely. And, I go to weekly meetings with the various hospitals, including Queens Medical Center. And so we hope the city's respite will be able to fill those shoes, at least partially, if not more. Our city respite has about 20 beds. The governor's had about 10. So we feel that now transitioning to a nonprofit, we will still be able to help those people. And the goal is to get them out of the respite, to get them better, get them into either a small house village, maybe a nursing home, a transitional shelter, some other more appropriate long-term place to stay.
I don't know if you have these numbers or statistics, but what percentage do you think of your team's time is spent dealing with homeless issues on those types of calls compared to other emergencies, as the ones that you've mentioned earlier that your team has been involved in just this week alone?
Yeah, every ambulance on this island deals with homelessness and the impacts, whether it's substance abuse, psychiatric problems. Definitely concentrated, I would say, from the airport to maybe Kalakaua Avenue. But every ambulance. So this morning, on my way to work, I stopped and with our Kailua ambulance was on Kalanianoli Highway with a man who had actually hypothermia. And he'd been at a bus stop for 48 hours. Concerned passerbys passed him. He had an open wound. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. And so they took him to the ER. But once they stabilized him, he probably doesn't need to be in the hospital, I'm not sure. But, he would be a candidate for a respite or some type of a protective shelter to get him out from the elements. So really, it's hard to say a percentage, but probably on the downtown ambulances, 20% of their calls are related to homelessness. For the outlying, country units, so to speak, it's probably less.
Let's talk about some of the other calls that you're responding to. We know that this is a very busy time of year for your agency. Schools are shut down. People are going to parties. Illegal fireworks definitely play a big role in some of the accidents that you have to respond to. What are your teams dealing with right now, and how can the public be of service to kind of, give your team some relief?
It's a great, happy time of year for most people, but they're rushing. So people are getting hit by cars. We had an auto pedestrian yesterday. We had a head-on collision yesterday. Just in the hour while I, waiting to get on the show, we've had 2 very serious car accidents, one on Eisenberg, one on the freeway. Not all that is rushing, but I think people taking a little extra time. The other thing is, while I said it's a happy time of year for many, it's not for some. And people have the seasonal blues, depression, and unfortunately we see suicide attempts go up as we enter the holiday season because some people are not having a happy season and they're getting this slump. And I think people should take advantage of crisis helplines or to make that call for help so they don't do something that they can't take back.
When you talk about some of these issues and some of these things, a lot of what your team responds to is when things get really bad, when you folks have to step in. How much of what you're doing now is also on the preventative side to prevent maybe some of these things from even happening, whether it be illegal fireworks or being conscious about the holiday season or, as you said, mental health services? How much of that is a part of what you folks are also trying to do so that you folks don't need, and your team doesn't even need to get involved in the first place?
Great question. EMS is more of a reactionary agency. We respond to the 911 call. CORE, to a certain degree, does do a lot of prevention where they go visit with homeless and may prevent a 911 call by doing, bandage changes or dressing changes or giving medications so that people don't have to go to the ER. But within our department, the big winner in preventive actions is ocean safety. This is something I learned when I came to emergency services because I didn't fully understand the impact of preventative actions on the public and how it prevents rescues. And you don't see statistics about the glorious rescue because it's the rescue that never happened. And our ocean safety beach lifeguards engage people coming into the parking lot down the beach, and we'll tell them, hey, it's not a good day today. There's jellyfish, there's extra currents, there's a rip. And they educate people, and sometimes they say, you shouldn't even go in the water today. So we probably prevent thousands of rescues every year because of what our ocean safety lifeguards do. And what they do is heroic too. And so really for prevention, they're the champions of that.
We talked a lot about recruitment on the EMS side. How is the retention and recruitment for lifeguards when it comes to ocean safety right now?
It is pretty good, and historically they've had very low vacancy rates. There's a recruit class, I think, in progress now. But we're growing in ocean safety too. We opened up the first new tower, I believe, in like 10 years at Electric Beach, which is become increasingly popular with tourists, especially at Ko'olina. It's a I wouldn't say a dangerous beach, but it has a current there at the outflow from the power plant, and people get in trouble there, and there's been drownings there. So we're really proud of that tower, and we also have extended hours now where we have the guards on the beach earlier and longer for the day, also just to improve safety around the island.
I want to get back to maybe that prevention piece, especially when it comes to travelers and those that you're having to educate about what maybe beaches are more adequate for those who don't have experience in the ocean. What are you seeing in terms of that paying dividends? Do you see more tourists listening to some of these warnings, or are you still running into some of these situations where, services are needed because of them getting into trouble?
I mean, there's always a few that get into trouble, but I think overall they're doing a pretty good job in ocean safety and getting the message out. The beach guards telling people, and the message to swim at guarded beaches. Don't go to the kind of the in-between places. There was a rash of rescues at the Portlock area, China Walls, where it's an unguarded beach. Maybe that messaging in the future could be a little better, but that's one kind of a hot spot that's not guarded. But other than that, around the island, there's mishaps and accidents always, but for the most part, I think everybody's doing a pretty good job.
You talked about the stress of this profession just on the personnel and all having to constantly respond to calls. I know during COVID it was a challenge because people were calling 911 maybe that didn't always need to, worried that they were infected with the virus. Are you seeing not necessarily COVID calls, but people who make similar calls to 911 that perhaps don't need that kind of intervention? They could go to urgent care, or they could go somewhere else. What's your message about when to call and when not to call?
We do get, I started an EM, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I think my first shift on the ambulance was in the late 80s. And generally people called for emergencies, and there were no cell phones then. So if there was an accident, you had to drive to a payphone, and there was some effort to actually summon the ambulance. But now the bar for calling is a lot lower. And I'm not embellishing this. These are all true calls. We've had a call in the last month for a acrylic nail that came off. We had a call for I can't sleep. We had a call for I can't think of them all off the top of my head, but what an ordinary person would think would be a very, very minor ailment that you could go to an urgent care for, or even your primary care doctor. But sometimes it's social determinants of health, where people don't have a car, they don't have money for an Uber. Maybe they're not, educated enough to know kind of how to navigate the medical system. Maybe they're new to the island. So, we try not to judge, but we also, really want, the 911 emergency system to be for emergencies: chest pains, shortness of breath, severe headaches, signs and symptoms of heart attacks or strokes, significant injuries. But we will respond to everything. We will go, and if the patient, demands to go to the hospital, we will take them. Now, those rules could change in the future if people become very abusive with that. We still have people that call every day, and we really try to work with them and their living situation. Do they need to be a nursing home? Do they need to be educated? One time we just had to find the person a private doctor, and we did that. And then she went from a call a day to like a call a month. So there's some effort on our part that we put forth when we find that people are using our services inappropriately, but we still will respond.
In the past, another topic that we've discussed that your department has had to deal with was the fentanyl use and exposure here in our communities, and what we were seeing at what point in time with just the frequency of those who have been exposed to it, and in many cases, some actually fatally passing away because of the exposure to fentanyl. What have you seen in the last few months? Is this continuing to be an issue where your team is responding to these types of calls?
Absolutely, and I've watched this over the last 18 months, and it's interesting to watch, where we'll have over weeks and weeks increasing cases, and then all of a sudden there'll be a high-profile arrest, and we've all seen them on the news. They're all documented, and a lot of times it's federal, and then maybe for a month or two after that, we'll see a dramatic drop in overdoses. Not zero, but a dramatic drop. I'm talking about from 5 to 10 a day down to 1 or 2 a day. And then the cycle resets after about 3 months. And I've watched this cycle now over the last 18 months, increasing, peaks at 3 or 4 months, major arrest, drops back down. So our partners in law enforcement are doing a great job, and because we see a decrease in overdoses when they do take major dealers off the streets. But it's still out there. We had an overdose, I know one at least yesterday, where a 30-year-old wasn't breathing. It was downtown. And our team gets there, they use the Narcan, and they wake up. And a lot of times they wake up and are so well, they say, see ya, not my first rodeo. They actually say this, and this happened to me before, I'm good. And off they go. Wow. So, and that's really unusual. In the past, we'd always get them to the hospital, and now they're actually refusing care. And hopefully they don't relapse. But now with the popularity of Narcan, their fellow narcotic users have Narcan. Now all the restaurants and bars have it. And so, that's why when we look at our own Narcan use, it's not really going up because so many people are getting it from before EMS gets there, that we don't use ours. So in a way, it's good that we're saving people, but it's still, the calls are still there, and it's just a sad reflection of what's happening in society, that people, are addicted to drugs.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. That was a new initiative that the city council put forward, to have bars and restaurants in Honolulu have to carry Narcan so that they can respond immediately, perhaps before your agency can get there. Are you seeing the general public? I know you talked about drug users themselves perhaps carrying this medication, but are you seeing that the implementation of that program actually have an effect?
I think I know of at least one bar that deployed it, and it was before the law, because I don't think the law's actually taken effect yet. It resulted in a save. So I know of one. But some of the controversy on the bill was some folks were saying, well, this isn't where most of the overdoses are happening, which is true, but they are still happening in these settings. And I know of at least one life that was saved. We do see more. Well, we see them everywhere. We see them on the streets. We see them in homeless encampments. We see them in private residences. And we've really seen a lot in the illegal game rooms. And so we've seen that as well, where, people are partying and they're just doing stuff where they're overdosing. So we will see more in the bars and the restaurants, hopefully not a lot more. But I am glad that they will be able to deploy it and save somebody, save a patron, and maybe they'll be grateful and patronize the business again.
Is there any specific area where maybe you're seeing more of these types of cases that can help to identify where some of these issues are, or is it pretty widespread and sporadic when it comes to your teams responding to these types of calls?
Certainly, unfortunately, Kukui Street, Chinatown, there's a lot of fentanyl use down there. But really no part of the island is spared. We've had fatalities on the west side. We've had fatalities in Hawaii Kai. We've had, near fatal overdoses on the windward side. So really no area is spared. But if I had to say where the most were, it's probably right in Chinatown, downtown, unfortunately.
We addressed the holiday season, and, in preparing for the show, I was reflecting on last year, and we had a number of really serious illegal firework incidents, including, I believe, a fatality, if I'm not mistaken. What's your message to the public around this issue? Because it seems to come up again and again every year that people, make a bad choice, and then your agency has to respond.
Yeah, and you wonder if what we say does any good, and I'm hoping it does in somebody. But last year I don't know, we had between 5 and 10 major mishaps where people lost fingers or were hit in the face with an aerial, and that broke their eye socket. I think maybe one person lost sight in one eye. Where they put the aerials in the pipes, a lot of these homemade ones we've had where they actually explode in the pipe, and then it's more like a shrapnel injury. And over the years we've seen fatalities from that. Another really sad one last year was somebody had a large firework, an M80 or M100 or one of these things, and they threw it in the street. Didn't go off. One of the kids from the neighborhood went to grab it thinking it was a dud, and he lost his hand. So just mostly accidents. I mean, almost certainly all these are, quote, accidents, but they're accidents that don't have to happen because people they really shouldn't be doing this in the first place. But there's just not enough care involved. A lot of times it's coupled with drinking, and people's just judgment is off. And it's a tough problem because, as I drive down through Waipahu on New Year's Eve and the different places I visit on the island, they're everywhere. The aerials. I mean, maybe not as bad as it was 20 years ago, but they are everywhere. And so there's really, unfortunately, a lot of opportunity to people to hurt themselves, but they could also hurt like their neighbor or a family member. And I'm guessing there's probably some civil liability in that as well, where you can actually put a lot at risk of your own assets if you hurt somebody else.
When it comes to that time of the year, noting that these types of occurrences happen regardless of the information and education that you provide, does your team do anything more, or does your department do anything more to help to plan for that? Do you deploy more people in certain areas? I mean, how do you respond when, as you said, when you drive in some of these areas, it's just they're everywhere, and knowing that those risk factors go up, how do you plan accordingly when in those situations?
Well, if we have extra personnel, we'll definitely put on extra ambulances, and I'm just happy for all of them being open, versus having extra. But if we have extra, we will open those up. We're going to have the core teams responding as well during the holidays. No, I would say New Year's Eve is the busiest night of the year here on Oahu, and a lot of other jurisdictions as well. So it's a crazy night for EMS, and our rigs are just up and down, running up and down. The breathing calls, though, are a little less than they were like 20 years ago, because when all the fireworks and all the firecrackers were legal. I mean, I used to buy duck 100,000 firecracker strings in Chinatown when it was legal. Those generate a lot of smoke. And so those really it's rough on the asthmatics and the people with COPD and emphysema. And so we'd have a lot more breathing calls, respiratory calls in years past. Those, fortunately, are not gone, but they're lower. And depending on how the trades are, can be even better. But we still every year get somebody who loses fingers.
Looking at, you were mentioning that you're hoping in February to add some new rigs to the system. Where are you hoping to put those, and what kind of a difference do you think they'll make?
You know, our busiest concentration of calls is definitely in the town area. And by town, I mean like downtown, probably from the airport to Kahala. So we're going to probably put 2 peak hour ambulances in that area between the airport and Kahala Mall. And maybe a rapid response unit as well, or a single paramedic in an SUV. But just, you know, our call volume's not steady over 24 hours. It starts peaking around 11 a.m. and starts kind of going down around 9 p.m. So getting an ambulance in there from like 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. in those hours, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. will really help with that surge of calls. You know, there's sometimes in the 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we may have 25 to 30 911 EMS calls, and we only have 21 ambulances. So, you know, and some people know this, some don't, but we have what's called mutual aid agreements. So we have partnerships with the Federal Fire Department. They have 4 ambulances, and American Medical Response, and they have anywhere from 5 to 10 ambulances on a day, where if we run out of ambulances or need their help, we can call them. Just like on base, if they need our help and we need an ambulance, we respond to them. So it's a back and forth, but that puts an extra 10 ambulances in the system every day for us to use if we need them, and it really helps out a lot, and it's reciprocating. You know, we help them as well.
You know, we're almost out of time, but as we asked Ernie Lau, it's the end of the year, and if you could maybe put together a Christmas wish list for your department, if you could go to the city council and say, this is what I need. I mean, what is sort of the outlook that you have for this department moving forward in 2024, and what are some of the priorities that you really want to see come to fruition in this next year?
You know, I'm very thankful for my team, EMS, Ocean Safety, Corps, Health Services. They're the best. I'm thankful for a great boss in the mayor and the managing director, Mike Formby. So my ask is just continued support. I don't necessarily think we need more. Kind of as a final note, we're really seriously looking at ocean safety as a separate department, and I think that decision is going to be made sometime in early 2024. But I'm just grateful for everything I have, and it's such a wonderful team.
Dr. Jim Ireland, thank you so much for being here today. We wish you a very happy holiday, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Where does the time go?
It goes so fast. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great show with 2 leaders who play such a key role in the safety of our community here in the city county of Honolulu. First, of course, starting off our conversation with Ernie Lau, getting an update on where things are at with Red Hill in regards to the defueling process and his overall, I think he's very pleased, and in some cases he said surprised at how quickly things have come to fruition with the defueling, noting that there are still a few factors that are ahead, but also very encouraged by the way things have gone so far.
Yeah, all that said, there is still a lot of work to be done in terms of getting that residual fuel and the sludge out of the system and tracking what he estimates to be 2 million gallons of fuel that has been leaked from this facility over its 80-year history, finding out where that fuel is. He did say that it's not just going to go away, and so we've got to figure out where it is so that there can be some remediation. Sounds like Halava Shaft is closed indefinitely, and so they're still looking for other sources and still a lot of work on that front.
And also waiting to see if that claim that they have made with the federal government about some of the costs that the department has had to incur during this time will eventually be refunded back to the department. He said if there was one Christmas wish, if he would want something that Santa would arrive with, it is that check for
$1.21
billion dollars. I think a lot of people would like that. And of course, our second conversation and our second guest with Jim Ireland, noting of some of the progress that is made with the addition of new EMS workers that will be joining the field and helping to alleviate what sounds like a very stressed team.
Yeah, 26 now in that new recruiting class. They'll be on the streets. They're doing their final surveys now. They'll be out and running in about 2 weeks, he said, and it couldn't come at a better time because the holidays are so busy. Just a reminder to all of us to slow down. You know, when he ticks off all those car accidents, people getting hit by cars, and just accidents that happen that maybe don't need to happen, you know, really taking a moment to be mindful, and also just a reminder about those illegal fireworks. You know, when he talks about the consequences of some of those choices, it's really hard to hear.
Yeah, and really, he also got into how fentanyl continues to be an issue within our community and something that his team at EMS continue to have to deal with. So great to hear from both guests. We will be switching gears next week. We want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas. And on the day after Christmas, we're going to be focusing on the climate.
That's right. We're going to be talking to Dr. Chip Fletcher over at SOWEST about climate change, the impacts that that's having to our community, not just sea level rise, but also drought that Ernie Lau talked about, and the fire danger, and also someone from the Harold K.L. Castle Foundation about some initiatives there and how they're helping to combat this very important issue. We wish you a very happy holiday, Merry Christmas if you celebrate. We leave you now with a shot of beautiful Hilo, I believe, and it looks like a pretty wet and rainy day out there.